everyone. This is a sample of my new How to Design a Comic Book Character course that's available on Gumroad for a forever purchase or available through an existing Skillshare subscription. I hope you enjoy the sample. The first question to really answer is, what is shape language? Here's my definition. Shape language is the repeated use of a shape's essence throughout a work to create a cohesive design. Like a leitmotif in music, it's a repeated use of a visual motif throughout a design. All 2D image making can be reduced to shapes. Compositions, light and shadows, lines, everything we do is in service of arranging these basic shapes in pleasing ways. But how do we create pleasing, appealing shapes? In the last chapter, we covered design principles. Here are a few more principles to keep in mind when it comes to making shapes. First, the three basic shapes are circle, square, and triangle. And just like colors, shapes also express something. They have an inherent quality to them that the viewer and audience resonate with. Circles, for example, are friendly, comfy shapes, representing larger-than-life characters who could wrap you in their arms or smile with large cheeks. It's not impossible to make villains out of circles, but it's certainly difficult and a little bit more subversive. Remember, we have to know the rules to break the rules. Squares are sturdy, maybe the standard banner-waving hero or the immovable large brute. They speak to objects that are hard to move and things that are strong and tough, like a building or a brick. Triangles are sharp and pointy, a character who is quick, aggressive, lethal, agile. Swords, knives, daggers, all these things have triangles. They imply some amount of precision and speed. By combining different shapes, each with its own meaning, you can evoke different aspects of a character's personality. So think about that as you combine shapes to create new characters. Then we have big, medium, and small. We've talked about this already in the design principles portion, but shapes can also come in big, medium, small sizes. You can also think of these as primary, secondary, and tertiary shapes, or principally, this is just moving from simple to complex, from big to small. We always want to think big and zoom into the details. And again, this applies just beyond shape making. This goes into color theory, into compositional reads, and basically anything else visual art related. This is a crucial principle to understand, study, and be conscious of as you make creative decisions, because it adds variety and visual interest, and things that are too even or too balanced or all the same shape just look boring, and we want to create interest both for the audience and ourselves. So what are some other ways we can modify shapes? Well, I'm going to do a demo real quick inside Affinity Designer, which is a vector-based program. And I just want to use this to show you some ways you can think about modifying shapes as you draw them. All shapes are made up of lines of one of these types. I just think of it as ICS lines. This is our straight line, our C curve, and our S curve. In combination, these can create a variety of different shapes. And we want to use a variety of ICS to create shapes. Now, the three basic shapes that we have to start with were once again circle, square, triangle. But we can play with these shapes. For example, we can taper a shape, pinch its ends, and now we have a trapezoid. Or in a triangle, we can also taper it and squish it down. We can also squash and stretch shapes. We can also push shapes. So instead of having an equilateral triangle here, we can start to move its point over and over and over as it creates more and more tension. And now this shape doesn't just imply something that's perfectly even and sturdy, it applies almost a shape that's moving in some direction. Likewise for an ellipse, we can squash and stretch it, we can shear it and extend it. Basically, to push shapes means to exaggerate them in some capacity. We don't want to just create boring shapes. We want to create something that's visually interesting. And to create visually interesting things is to create shapes that are slightly exaggerated and have some variety to them. We can also use other shapes to carve shapes. So for example, I could start carving circles into this square and create a whole new shape just by thinking of the negative shapes rather than just thinking of what the basic shape is. Think of other ways you can introduce shapes to either add or subtract from them. We can create a variety of new shapes by simply subtracting and adding shapes together. And again, I'm just showing you this in a vector program, but I want you to be conscious of this as you make shapes with line. So let's take Scarper here, for example. He's going to be the character that I'm going to be making from start to finish, but here he is in his final form, and his foundational shape, it's a triangle. Everything about Scarper relied on a triangle. And I took it one step further and I said, what if it was a bit more of a curved triangle, like an archway? And so this shape is repeated all throughout his design. To the chip in his hat, to the filigree on his outfit, and his boots, and even his cape. I knew I wanted this character to look lethal. He needed to be villainous. Now, of course, he still looks friendly. He's got a smile on, but can you trust him? Probably not. And of course, the dark clothing as well kind of sets him apart as someone not exactly to be trusted. But really, if I had rounded out all his shapes, he would have lost a lot of that villainous intrigue that comes with something that looks sharp, pointy, and aggressive. And even when thinking macro, I knew I wanted his body type to be from the top down, even the shape of his face. Well, all my characters have pointy ears. That's just a rule I have for myself in my world. Everyone has pointy ears of some kind. There's no humans allowed. So that's kind of a given. But Scarper's face and his whole body is shifted to look like an aggressive triangle. And again, this is by design. Now, we don't want to get too bogged down into a single shape, right? There's still so many other things to solve. So the fact that I introduced other kinds of shapes, like these more sturdy rectangular pieces that function as decoration for parts of him, create little contrast, but they don't upset the story of the character at all. And even his gun is a lot more brick-like. There's some story-related reasons for that we'll get into later. But the story drives the shape. What is this character? What is their background? What is their story? He's tall, sharp, aggressive. He needs to look villainous. And he also needs to have all this functional wear on him. To create your own shape language, simply pick a basic shape, modify it, and repeat it as a visual motif throughout your design. You can extrapolate from the base shape you made to make more complicated shapes, thereby using shape language to inform more shape language. And this creates a style guide. Remember to keep in mind also big, medium, small. To create interesting shapes, we need to keep all the design principles in mind to create appealing, pleasing shapes. Shape language involves the use of all of these things. We want to create interesting shapes that are exaggerated, we want all the pieces and all the shapes we use to feel like they're a part of the same visual family. That's what it means to repeat its essence. It's all in the same family. If you're going to make a triangle with circles carved out of it, then this needs to be repeated in the weaponry and parts of the clothes. We are keeping the ethos and the essence of this shape throughout the design. And that's what I did with Scarper here. The essence of this is this archway here. It provides direction, it looks lethal, it looks like the end of a bullet. There are a lot of reasons why this shape works. And part of the reason is using it throughout his design unifies this character to look like he got his costume all from the same place. And the nice thing is once you pick a shape and you build a shape language, the rest of the design sort of just comes together on its own, because the hard part is creating a pleasing shape and then knowing when and where to use it. But once you have a shape in mind, you can start to think, where can I use this? Where does this belong? And it'll help you create your big, medium, and small. Lines as well can create big, medium, small shapes. Remember, we talked about the 3 basic line types, ICS. Well, you can create boring ICS lines. Well, how do you do that? Well, one way is by always using a predictable line. This just becomes boring. Instead, think about ways that you can exaggerate your ICS lines, thereby not just making something even, but something that's slightly off-centered with a big, medium, and small even inside the line. We have our big, medium, small. Big, medium, small. And you can do that all throughout your shape creation process. And by combining I, C, and S, we can create entirely new shapes. I, C, S. ICS. ICS. So think about ways that you can combine these to create really interesting new shapes. Think of basic shapes, think of your lines that you have available to you. Try to avoid shapes that are even right next to each other or even in distance across from each other. Try and offset the balance in some way. Even when it comes to drawing characters, everything can begin to have very similar shapes. And this is just the way anatomy works, right? But we want to avoid that by making something a little bit more interesting. So pick one of these to exaggerate. When you make creative decisions like this about your shapes, you create visual interest and people can tell. Even when it comes to creating characters, it's super easy to fall into a trap of evenly spaced elements. Instead, think about big, medium, small. Lines and other shapes break up existing shapes. When a character comes to this point and everything is evenly spaced, at some point we need to make a decision. Something about this design isn't working because it's repetitive. We have too many medium chunks right next to each other. So we can use other lines and other shapes to break up existing shapes. And think of this dynamically. We can move shapes up and down. Let's just say that I move this piece down and I just want the character wearing smaller boots. So, by simply paying attention and being conscious of the shapes that we're making from a macro to a micro level, we can create big, medium, small, create a variety of interest, and create appealing characters. So again, if you have a character in your head that you just can't get out, my How to Design a Comic Book Character course is going to be perfect for you. And this was just a small sample of that. Consider supporting the course, consider taking it. I look forward to seeing what you create. Now go and make good art.